In the state of Indiana, if you don't have a Hollywood movie made about you or a folding chair thrown in your honor, people tend to forget you existed. We worship the 76 undefeated squad like the Holy Scripture. We treat the 87 team like legends. But there is a massive, gaping hole in the gospel of Hoosier basketball. And it's a team that was technically better than the national champions that year. In 1988, the experts said Indiana was rebuilding. They said the roster was too young, too thin, and that the Big Ten belonged to the high-flying Illini or the loaded Michigan Wolverines. Instead, a sophomore from Marion named Jay Edwards and a bunch of overmatched kids went out there and treated the toughest conference in history like a light Sunday scrimmage. They swept Purdue. They finished 3 games ahead of the team that actually won the Natty, and yet they're treated like a middle child who went to med school and didn't get a cool nickname. Today, we are fixing history. So grab your sweater vest and lock the doors. We're talking about the forgotten kings of Assembly Hall, the 1989 Indiana Hoosiers. Hillbilly Monkey, roll that intro. Hello guys, and welcome to this special edition episode of Indiana Sports Connection. I am your residential anchor, Aaron. Thank you so much for being here and being part of this community. Do me a quick favor, hit that subscribe button down below, hit that thumbs up button, and hit that bell notification so you don't miss these great videos when they come out. Trying to make these videos more and more immersive as we go. Without further ado, let's get into talking about the 1989 Indiana Hoosiers. If you walked into Assembly Hall in late November 1988, you wouldn't have seen a championship contender. You would have seen a team that looked like it was trying to solve a Rubik's Cube in the dark. The 1989 Indiana Hoosiers didn't just start slow, they practically stalled in the driveway. After the 1987 title glory and a mediocre 1988 follow-up, the critics were sharpening their pens, ready to write the obituary of the Bob Knight era. Early in the season was a masterclass in frustration. The Hoosiers were young, disjointed, and apparently allergic to consistency. The season would start out with 2 victories against Illinois State and Stanford, who some thought Stanford was going to be a pretty good team that year. Then they headed to Madison Square Garden for the NIT preseason invitational. At Madison Square Garden, the Hoosiers were trounced by Syracuse, giving up 102 points, losing 102-78. And then 2 days later, getting trounced again by North Carolina, losing 106-92. In the Bob Knight era, he had never given up 100 points in a game and gave up 100 points in as many as 3 days. They momentarily righted the ship against Miami of Ohio at home before going to the Hoosier Dome to lose to Louisville 101-79. And then to culminate this doldrums period, you couldn't do any worse than losing at the Joyce Center to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish 71-84. The Hoosier season started out 3-4, and it was looking as bad as it possibly could be. The experts, who, let's be honest, they probably just wanted to see Bob Knight blow a gasket, claimed the motion offense had finally been figured out. They looked at a roster full of sophomores like Jay Edwards and Brian Sloan and a freshman like Eric Anderson and concluded that the Big Ten was going to eat them alive. At this point, the only thing championship level about this team was Bob Knight's ability to turn a certain shade of red that doesn't actually exist in nature. With a 3-4 record to start, Bob Knight's blood pressure was so high it could have powered the entire city of Bloomington. What was the general gonna do? How was he going to turn it around? To understand how Bob Knight saved the 1989 season, you have to understand that the motion offense was usually treated like a socialist collective. Everyone moves, everyone passes, and no one is bigger than the system. But in '89, Knight realized he had a Ferrari and Jay Edwards, and a bunch of reliable station wagons surrounding him. He didn't abandon the system, he just re-engineered it to make sure the Ferrari got the most gas.
probably one of Coach's best coaching jobs. Not a team full of talent, probably his best job, and a group of guys that just figured out how to play together.
Normally, Knight's offense relied on constant away screens, screening for the player furthest away from the ball. In '89, Knight started implementing more staggered double screens specifically designed to free up Edwards. Instead of Edwards just finding a spot, the offense became a coordinated effort to run his defender through literal forests of teammates.
He was a tremendously gifted basketball player. He's one of those guys that whatever he did, it didn't seem hard.
By the time the defender fought through Eric Anderson and Joe Hillman, Edwards was already squared up and launching a jumper. He used the post as a distributor hub. Knight stopped treating his big men like freshman Eric Anderson as just rebounders who occasionally fall into a layup. He moved them into the high post. By doing this tactic, he put a passing big man at the free throw line. It put the opponent's rim protector out of the paint. The results? A high-low look where Edwards could cut backdoor, or more importantly, the defender couldn't cheat towards the perimeter because the middle was wide open. It forced teams to pick their poison. Give up a layup to the cutting freshman, or let the best shooter in the country take an uncontested three. Bob Knight famously hated fast breaks, the look of playground basketball. He preferred organized, fast-paced walking. However, in '89, he gave them a bit more of a leash, but it worked by pushing the pace enough to prevent the defense from setting up their illegal zones. According to Knight, Edwards found transition lanes that didn't exist in the half-court set. Knight taught the other four players how to use Jay Edwards' gravity. Because every coach in the Big Ten was terrified of Edwards, they would often double-team him the moment he touched the ball. Knight drilled Joe Hillman and Brian Sloan to immediately slash to the rim the second the double team committed. Edwards became a brilliant decoy passer. He'd draw two defenders, look like he was going to shoot, and then whip a pass to the wide-open teammate for the bucket. Knight realized that while the system was important, Jay Edwards was a generational bucket getter. He gave Edwards the green light to be the alpha, which is like giving a master chef keys to a five-star kitchen. Bob Knight realized he didn't have the veteran leadership of a Steve Alford anymore, so he stopped trying to coach them like 22-year-olds and started coaching them like the high-ceiling talents that they are. The Hoosiers would go on a phenomenal winning streak, first winning games against cupcakes like VCU, Santa Clara, and Arkansas Little Rock, then beating UTEP with Tim Hardaway, before going to Kentucky and beating a Eddie Sutton cheating Kentucky team by a satisfying score of 75-52, then stomping St. Bonaventure, Utah State, before matching up with Ohio State and beating them 75-65, who they were ranked 14th at the time. And then a big rivalry game on January 9th at Purdue, where the Hoosiers would sleek out a 1-point victory against the Boilermakers in a game where every call seemed to go against Indiana, every single foul call. And there's no sound in nature more beautiful than 17,000 Purdue fans having to simultaneously walk home in the snow after Jay Edwards just beat your asses. They'd continue their winning ways, beating Northwestern at Wisconsin, Michigan State, before culminating in a giant game at number 6 Michigan on January 23rd, 1989. The first loss of the streak would come at number 1 Illinois. The Flying Illini beat the Hoosiers that night 65-75, but the Hoosiers would get right back on track, winning on January 30th, beating number 12 Iowa at home 104-89, with the beloved B.J. Armstrong at the helm. And they'd continue their winning ways, beating Minnesota, Northwestern, sweeping Purdue, sweeping Michigan, sweeping Michigan State, Minnesota, and Ohio State. before it all culminated on a March 5th, 1989 game where number 8 Illinois comes to Assembly Hall. At this point, the Hoosiers had won 22 out of 23 games, an incredible streak and a turnaround that would be defined by relentless defensive pressure and rebounding. They went from being a defensive laughingstock to the kings of the Midwest, proving that even Bob Knight's worst starts could lead to his most underrated coaching jobs. By mid-season, the motion offense had morphed into a Jay Edwards delivery system. It was disciplined. It was exhausting for the defense, but it had a modern edge that caught the rest of the Big Ten off guard. They expected a grind-out game that got a sharpshooting clinic. By 1989, the Indiana Hoosiers and Bob Knight were no stranger to the NCAA tournament. The Hoosiers at this point were a machine. They had the Purple Rain duo of Jay Edwards and Lyndon Jones, who had already won 3 straight high school titles together because apparently they didn't know other hobbies existed. With Jay Silk Edwards, the undisputed alpha, averaging 20 points a game, who shot the 3 ball with the kind of confidence reserved for people who think they can actually fix their own plumbing. His jump shot was so smooth, it could have been sold as a premium skincare product. The team would cruise through the first 2 rounds of the tournament, jumping out to an early lead on George Mason, 56-27. George Mason would come back in the end and make it a respectable 99-85. Up next, the Hoosiers played UTEP and Tim Hardaway in the second round. Despite Hardaway getting 20 points and Greg Foster adding 18, the Hoosiers made cake work of UTEP, beating them 92-69 at the McHale Center in Tucson, Arizona. The next game would come up against PJ Carlissimo and Seton Hall. We're on a ravaging trail through the NCAA tournament that year. These 2 coaches go way back to PJ Carlissimo's youth. Here's what they had to say about each other before the game.
When I was in high school, I went to Camp St. Andrew basketball camp in Tunkhannock, just outside of Scranton, and Coach Knight came in and was a guest lecturer and spoke to us, myself and all the players from the prep, and we learned basketball from him back at an early age. He was an old guy even then, though.
I'm just tickled to death for PJ that he's been able to get his team where he has it and do the kind of job he has. I was very, very impressed. It goes beyond a kid that you've known for a long time. He becomes now a coach that I have a great respect for after having had a chance to watch the kind of job he's done. And I think will continue to do. As long as he coaches, as long as he stays doing what he's doing now, he's going to be one of the best coaches we've got.
With the Hoosiers entering the NCAA tournament as a 2 seed, expectations were national title or we riot. After dusting off the first 2 rounds of the tournament, the Hoosiers would have their work cut out for them with Seton Hall. Now, in 1989, Seton Hall wasn't exactly a blue blood. They were a team from New Jersey coached by PJ Carlissimo, a man who looked like he'd rather be at a Bruce Springsteen concert than a basketball game. But the Pirates were gritty, and they treated the Hoosiers like a New Jersey Turnpike toll booth. They just kept taking their money. Indiana lost 65-78 in a game that felt like watching a Ferrari get stuck in a muddy ditch. The Hoosiers couldn't find their rhythm, and Seton Hall's John Morton and Andrew Gaze played like they had a personal vendetta against the state of Indiana. It was one of the most brutal, physical games that I've ever watched. But the Hoosiers were overmatched that day. Seton Hall didn't just beat IU, they went on a rampage. They crushed UNLV and Duke to reach the national championship game, where they eventually lost to the champions, Michigan, in overtime. That's right, the Big Ten team that Indiana had bullied the entire season ended up winning the whole thing. It's like watching your younger brother win the lottery with the ticket you threw in the trash. Well, there's so much more to say about that team. As I watched all these old clips and everything, from Jadlow and his footwork and his contortions in the air to get the ball in the basket, to Jamal Meeks came in off the bench and played critical minutes for this team. And the way that they all were put together, the way that Bob Knight put it together is the reason why we all trusted in Bob Knight's coaching and everything like that from the very beginning. But this was one of his best coaching efforts. How he was able to put this together Joe Hillman is a valuable leader on this team. And then taking Jay Edwards and putting him in the prime position to be able to score the way he did. Lyndon Jones had a fantastic jump shot, and the way he handled the ball and distributed the ball, he was fantastic. And Jadlow, we mentioned him. There are so many unsung heroes on this team, and the grittiness, the way they put it together, and the way they started out 3-4, it just shows how we believed in Bob Knight, and Bob Knight believed in us, and he got it done over and over again. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Indiana Sports Connection. If you have anything else to say about this team, what you remember, I'm sure there's way more, but I wanted to keep this to a tight under 20-minute video. So leave your comments down below, and until next time, stay classy out there, Hoosier fans.